Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Spatz, and I'm just going to make a few introductory remarks to tonight's very exciting session and do a little bit of housekeeping and introduce some context, and then we'll get into it. So I'm Ben Spatz. I'm based at University of Huddersfield. I'm a reader in media and performance. I'm actually in London today to deal with US Embassy type things. And so if you've been joining the last few sessions, you know that one of the things I've been thinking through at the start of these events, and these are some of the first events that this new research center is hosting, is some kind of acknowledgement of land or place or emplacement. And I've been thinking a little bit about that specifically in relation to Northern England, but here I am in London, so it's even more clear. This is a work in progress, and it's very much from my own thinking and my own positionality, and I'm welcoming all kinds of feedback on it as it develops. But I just want to kind of say that the context that I want to offer as a starting point here is that, as Frantz Fanon said, London, along with England, along with the rest of Europe, is literally a creation of colonial processes that this country took space to enact across the world. And as a parallel to that, as a following from that, I want to say that the right of all of the people who have been colonized through those processes, all of the people and the peoples and the places and the knowledges, the right to not only live and work freely and move freely in and through the United Kingdom, but also to determine the future, both political and conceptual, of the United Kingdom, and indeed this city, remains unceded. Having said that, I'll introduce the Center for Experimental Practices. As I mentioned, these seminar series talks are just the first few series events that we've launched. It's a new research center, Center for Experimental Practices, focusing on experimental practice in a very broad sense, understanding that through practice research that is already practiced, research outside the university, practices outside the university that are research, that constitute research practices in the university that are research, but also some kind of practice. And we're exploring what that means, but there is certainly a framing towards the politics of practice research, the politics of artistic research and research creation, and what that can mean. I'd like to thank Colin Frank, who is here, who is the managing director of the center, and Kate, who is working on programming in the center and part of curating this series, Kate Holden. This is the Lines of Flight seminar series, which has actually existed based at University of Huddersfield since, I think, 2014. And it's always been a public seminar series. It was then in-person event. Now we've shifted online for a few years. But it's always looking to push the boundaries of what university research is, to probe those boundaries and those limits, and to ask what the university can do, what the university can be, what it can't be, what kind of space it can become, what kind of space we need it to become. This spring, we have this really exciting series of sessions that are called Lines of Flight 2023 Black Methods. And of course, that is inspired by the work of Catherine McKittrick and others who have theorized Blackness not only as an identity category, a demographic category, but also as knowledge, as method, as epistemology, so crucial for anyone thinking about artistic research or practice research or research creation to be engaged with that radical epistemic calls that are being made through those kind of interventions. So in terms of housekeeping, just to say that the chat is open, and if you do have any comments or questions for AD or for anyone that you would like to put into the chat during the kind of first part of the session, you're welcome to do that. Just pop them in there and we will pick them up when we get into a more open conversation. But you're also welcome to save your comments and questions for a second part where we will have an open conversation. And then you can very much ask your questions or make your comments audiovisually by turning on your mic, turning on your video camera. So you can do either one. and we're very happy for the conversation. We were just talking before we opened the session about how valuable the conversations are and the questions that arise through conversation, and that is very much what this is about. So, having said all that, I'm extremely grateful to Obi Emelonye, who is co-hosting, or really hosting, this session. Obi is a colleague of mine, has been a colleague of mine for a couple of years at the University of Huddersfield, an extraordinary filmmaker, initially trained in law. We haven't talked about this, but this is really, really interesting. Initially trained in law and then shifted to filmmaking to become an award-winning filmmaker, writer, director, producer, having produced multiple full-length feature films as well as television series, and all really, really, really interesting stuff. So I've been very inspired to be working alongside Obi, and I'm really happy that Obi will be hosting this event. And so thank you, Obi. Thank you, AD, of course, AD Carson, for coming and presenting. And with all that said, I will step back and hand it over to you, Obi. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're waking up. My name is Obi Emelonye, and it's my real pleasure to virtually commune with my brother from another mother. I'm trying to rhyme like him, but I'm not very good at it, so pardon me. This is not about me, this is about AD Carson, Ph.D. Underlined, AD Carson, Ph.D. AD Carson is an award-winning performance artist and educator from Decatur, Illinois. His work focuses on race, literature, history, rhetorics, and performance. He received a PhD in rhetorics, communication, and information design at Clemson University. And his album, I Used to Love to Dream, was the first ever rap album to be peer-reviewed for publication in an academic press. It was released by University of Michigan Press in 2020. His works are built on the concept of his doctoral dissertation, which is titled Owning My Masters, the Rhetoric of Rhyme and Revolutions. It's a rap album that was internationally heralded and was also recognized by the Clemson Graduate Student Government as the outstanding dissertation in 2017. I Used to Love to Dream was the winner of the 2021 Research Award for Excellence at the in the Arts and Humanities from the University of Virginia. Dr. Carson and his work with students, staff, and communities was recognized in 2016 with the Martin Luther King Jr. Award for Excellence in Service at Clemson University for his campaign, See the Stripes, which raised awareness about historic and entrenched racism at the university. I've had to abridge some of this because if I went on the way he's done it, we'll be here all night. But I would add that he's the author of a novel, Cold. I'm going to have a conversation with him about, making that into a film, I suppose. We'll have a chat. My people will talk to your people, brother. Dr. Carson has been featured by Complex, Washington Post, the Chronicles of Higher Education, Forbes, The Guardian, Journal for Cultural and Religious Theory, Time Magazine, USA Today, and XXL, just to mention a few. His most recent album is titled Talking to Ghosts. Can't wait to hear that. Dr. Carson is presently assistant professor of hip-hop. Hip-hop. Assistant professor of hip-hop. I like to hear that. Let me say that again. Assistant professor of hip-hop and Global South at the University of Virginia. I think, let me stop there. And as a way, before he enters the fray, and gives us a bit more personal insights into who he is and what he does and what he's achieved. I think the best way to segue into that section is to hear some of his tracks. So before we hear from you, Dr. Carson, if you could introduce us to some of your work.
Yes, thank you. Get to the... Here we go. No, wrong one.
Yes. I tell it like it is. I be knowing that folks be not understanding the moves I make when I make them, but I be making them still. Rules I be breaking be arbitrary. If art's necessary to document how I live and how I lived it, then what you're about to hear is better than the peer review. Peering through to the process, a living document of how I got this from where it was to where it is, delivered through your speakers, consistent with the thesis, the remix. A lot of people feel I don't exist. I'm not inside the public eye, so they go and diss, but my fingerprint is left on the head of a chauvinist. Cause my impact is felt via vocalists and the socialist posing as a clone example. But the beat feels different once you know the sample. I'm instrumental, producing thoughts on an open panel. Furious, these are the things I'm not supposed to grapple. Top lyricist, and I'm dope with Scrabble. I ain't flip-flop with the feet like a broken sandal. I just blow the candles every year's a better year to flow and dazzle every peer who figured the culture's tackle. See the quotes unravel, but I'm headstrong, living right, opposite of dead wrong. Kept on, synonymous to the ampersand when the leg's on. Know what I am when you see me, I'm the best, dog. I be knowing I be on some shit I shouldn't, Lord forgive me. But if I could change a thing, I probably wouldn't. I be putting on a mask, still never smile for cameras. Try to keep the hunger of an amateur. Ampersand, ample ammunition, handle business, thinking little, plan, plot, strategize, and look out for watching eyes. Occupy the lane I'm in, and know that even if I signal, it'll only change what I see in the rear view. Where I'm going, I don't be knowing the verses that I be wanting to write. Bragging in raps is kind of boring despite knowing I'm one of one. And niggas love to hate to see me be it. I am, and that's just making me repeat it. And as I write before I read it, though I've had less and it made better with the stress. When your friends left to be ancestors, it ain't in a vision or premonition that 2020 saw me seeing more than I ever wanted happen to many folks I love. Started with a funeral and heightened by anxiety, while trying to keep my usual demeanor and procedures, quarantining, using FaceTime and baselines to pace time, cause I wasn't traveling across the state line. Decatur on my mind, and Virginia's where I'm at, and I don't know when I'll be going back, and probably I won't sleep until I do, and if the proof is what it seems, I said it when I used to love to dream. I be knowing I be on some shit I shouldn't, Lord forgive me, but if I could change a thing, I probably wouldn't. I be putting on the mask, still never smile for cameras, try to keep the hunger of an amateur. Ampersand, ample ammunition, handle business, thinking little, plan, plot, and strategize, and look out for watching eyes. Occupy the lane I'm in, and know that even if I signal, it'll only change what I see in the rear view.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is my pleasure, my privilege, my honor to introduce to you the man who's rewriting the books on what it is to be hip, what it is to be academic, what it is to be a scholar. I give you Dr. A.D. Carson, Ph.D.
Appreciate you, Obi. Thanks so much. So the piece that was just playing there is it's a remix to a song called Ampersand. And that I realized as it was playing that version is not on the album. There's the beat is remixed for the song called "And Per Se And," which is on the Talking to Ghosts album, but ampersand, the original version, was on the album called "I Used to Love to Dream." And "I Used to Love to Dream" came out in 2020, and "Talking to Ghosts" came out in 2022. But I want to go back to before that, and I think that maybe I'll also try to explain why the ampersand is kind of important at that point in the story, and the like sort of the origins of the ampersand, you know, like sort of the symbol itself. And so I want to just kind of read a little bit from a piece called "Being Dope in Language," to situate the work that I have been doing. As Obi indicated, I did an album in 2017 called "Owning My Masters, The Rhetorics of Rhymes and Revolutions." And I'll be re-releasing that album, a mastered version of that album, recontextualized this summer with the University of Michigan Press, following a process similar to the project that I did with them, or with the process that I did with them for "I Used to Love to Dream," which is still being fine-tuned. You know, it always feels weird to talk about an album being peer-reviewed, not because, as some folks have kind of contested online, that every album is already peer-reviewed, because I don't really believe that that's true. I believe that there are processes that are kind of baked into the making of work like this that might make the peer review process that academic presses will take your work through kind of irrelevant or less relevant. And so I know that one of the conversations that I had with the acquisitions editor at the press at University of Michigan was that it was a really polished version of the project by the time they got it. And that was because a version of the album existed on SoundCloud and then in Dropbox that I sent out to people who gave me feedback before I went back to go back into the sessions to mix myself, or to send it to the engineer who was doing the mastering, to make sure that everything was coherent before anybody outside of that circle was able to hear it. So the stuff that we got from the readers, it was much less about the content, and it was so much more about presenting it to, you know, so-called academic audiences, how we might be able to make a project like that accessible to people who are thinking through these questions, you know, academically, but also to try to present it as an open access resource so that folks wouldn't have to pay for it, and it would be as easy for them to get it. And so if there's any one like regret that I have about the platform that Michigan has right now, it's that Fulcrum, their digital archiving system, doesn't have a playlist option. So the album that I gave them, I really had to wrestle with whether I wanted to make it into 8 separate tracks or I made it into 1 track, so that people would have to listen to it all the way through the way that I wrote it. And that's not a consideration that you have if you're on Bandcamp or if you're on Apple Music or Spotify. You can kind of mix things up and well, you can let things play all the way through, or you can play it however you want. And so that's just like, you know, one small thing about, you know, sort of so-called peer-reviewed rap music. And I'm certain that that sounds a whole lot better coming from the people, you know, like who are putting it out, to note that it is a first, than it does for anybody who knows how hip hop histories are always contesting, you know, openly these histories that try to say it was one thing, you know, when very often it was so many other things. So that's just a note to begin. But I want to talk about the album from 2017 to begin. And so Owning My Masters, The Rhetorics of Rhymes and Revolutions, it's a digital archive of original rap music and spoken word poetry. It's accompanied by a, well, it has a primary music playlist. It has 34 tracks. There's a YouTube video channel, an annotated timeline, photo galleries, digital liner notes that are collected, sort of as a book for you to be able to flip through. And rather than theorizing about hip hop, the project does the work through the genre of hip hop. It privileges rap music and spoken word poetry as its primary means of engagement, and its contents call for attentiveness to historical and contemporary social justice issues. And I framed the project around the conjecture that the study of hip hop has assisted in pushing through some of the boundaries imposed by many academic conventions. And as a transdisciplinary practice, it's connected many seemingly different academic disciplines. And with the project, then I asked 5 questions. The first question is, what are the roles of hip hop performance in knowledge production, and what types of ideological work is being done by the scholarly engagement with hip hop performance as, exists before 2017? The second question is, how can hip hop performance resist or push beyond the limits set upon it by academic convention? The third question is, how does one more effectively approach hip hop academically in a manner that speaks through one of its forms and does not reinscribe, quote, the oppression the form seeks to subvert? And I think that question is really speaking specifically to, there's an essay, I want to say the scholars are Saucier and Woods. It's called Hip Hop Studies in Black, or at least the version of the essay was. And I think that in the book on Maroonage, it's called Against Hip Hop Studies. But it's really worth checking out. And then the fourth question is, how do we responsibly deal with issues of access to academic spaces for producers of cultural products like rap music and rap lyrics? And then the fifth question is, how should the academic institutions where the lives and works of artists like Nas and Jay-Z are studied, how should the academics, like those places where their works are studied, consider the formal education status of aspiring hip hop artists or those who are not well known already? So both Nas and Jay-Z dropped out of high school before their professional rap careers began, which means that they would probably not qualify to study or teach at those institutions that now seem to be offering classes, certificates, and sometimes even degrees studying their work. And so I also say that though it's existed in and around academia for decades, the performance of some of hip hop's cultural products simultaneously tend to exist on the margins of what's considered proper scholarly engagement in many academic disciplines. And additionally, this academic study of some hip hop cultural products seem to reproduce certain forms of and assumptions about knowledge production regarding hip hop. Furthermore, some of the conventions in the discipline and certain types of scholarly performance of hip hop scholarship render Blackness pathological, even in the service of attempting to combat what might be understood to be anti-Blackness by virtue of attempts to confront the notion that hip hop culture is in fact deviant or bad or unworthy of study. And then they're therefore complicit in the denial of what P. Khalil, Saucier, and Tryon Woods described as, quote, Black sentient humanity and the complex interplay between culture and historical context, end quote, in the field. So owning my master's, The Rhetorics of Rhymes and Revolutions, is what I offer as one of many possible explorations and analyses of this broader problem. And the album was created by me making, when I arrived in Clemson, South Carolina in 2013, the same weekend that the trial was being had for George Zimmerman for the killing of Trayvon Martin. That weekend, I want to say that 12 Years a Slave came out in the theaters, and also Zimmerman was found not guilty. And I had literally just moved onto a plantation. And what I mean by a plantation is that Clemson University, some people say it's a former plantation. And I would say that, I don't know if former is really accurate. The plantation house is open 7 days a week. And as a part of what the family gave to the state to turn into the university, the students and the taxpayers of the state are paying to keep that plantation house open and paying for the upkeep of it. And when I first went into the house in 2013, the way that the enslaved people were described were as workers or employees or servants, and never as enslaved people. If you walk out of the house and then you look to your left, you can see into the eyes of the tiger mascot that are in the far end zone. And so, like, quite literally down the hill from the plantation house is the field on which the university makes millions of dollars from amateur athletes playing football, risking brain injuries and all kinds of other bodily injuries, and folks have written about that for a long time. And so it's not a stretch for me to say that the language of former plantation didn't really seem very, very accurate. And so while these things are going on in the world and these things are going on campus, and I'm supposed to be studying in a program it's supposed to be about rhetorics, communication, and information design, I find myself doing what I always do, and that is writing music, writing lyrics to kind of deal with whatever is going on in my life at the moment. So I didn't know that was me starting on the dissertation project that week that I arrived. I just knew that the best way for me to make sense of what was going on, because I didn't have other people there to talk to, was to make music about it. And that's always been my process. And when I was in Illinois, I'm from Illinois, and so I did the exact same kind of work. And one of the things that I was trying to figure out when I went to South Carolina was if they were being honest, the folks in the program at Clemson, when they said that they were going to try to embrace, like the triad of knowing, making, and doing. Would I be able to not only read these things, but make the kind of thing that I want, and then have it do the kind of work that I want to do? And so I didn't know that in that first year. But one of the ways that I came to start thinking about what the work was to think about embodying dope. And again, this is not because of something that I read in somebody's book. It was because what opened up the space for me to be in a place like Clemson, what opened up the space for me to finish undergrad and even get a degree, was that I come from this small town in the center of the country called Decatur, Illinois. And I imagine that folks who lived through it know that places like that were ravaged by the so-called war on drugs. And that, so that's what I grew up around. And these were the kinds of things that were being described. I'm not talking about in the music that we were listening to from other places, but in the music that was being made where I am from, folks were describing the conditions. And so as I started thinking about the sort of like the logic of drugs and started reading more, like I also have, friends who went to prison for those very same things. And even myself, if it wasn't, I guess I'll just say that, like a combination of luck and a few other things meant that, as my best friend was getting arrested and going away to prison, I was on campus at a fraternity event. And that meant that I wasn't present where I would normally be. And so I didn't get arrested that night. I don't know. I'll talk a little bit more about this, because the most recent project that I'm working on right now is a book called Being Dope, and an album called Illicit. And they kind of go together. And I talk in more detail about this, but as I'm thinking about embodying dope, I do remember some of these things from Invisible Man and Crack Wars, these two books. And so I'm just going to read this piece, and then we can kind of get into some discussion. And so, yeah, embodying dope, and also disembodied Black voice. You don't see him. He often doubts if he really exists. His is not the radio phonograph. His is capable of 5 live sounds, of feeling their vibration, of being the embodiment of those sounds. But he's not 5 Louis Armstrongs playing and singing, "What did I do to be so black and blue?" Yet he's made poetry out of his being invisible. And it's probably because he's unaware that he is invisible. I understand his invisibility, though, I think. He has that slightly different sense of time, and I can at least tell when he's not quite on the beat, sometimes ahead and sometimes behind. But never mind me. This isn't about me. He listens in that newly discovered analytical way of listening to music. I hear each melodic line existing of itself, standing out clearly from all the rest, saying its piece, waiting patiently for the other voices to speak. He listens in time and space, entering and descending into its depths like the invisible men before us, like Dante. Knowing now that few really listen to this, the invisible music of his isolation, he asks, not what did he do to be so blue, but what do we do with the black? Bear with us. Some of those words are borrowed from the narrator of Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. It says that he discovers a new analytical way of listening to music while under the spell of reefer. He's on dope. I imagine his being self-critical is a result of his being what Hortense Spillers describes as discomfited or unoriented. She suggests that this is what quote, the work of the intellectual should make her hearer or reader, end quote. Now, Avital Ronell might call it a conjuring. She writes, quote, intoxication names a method of mental labor that is responsible for making phantoms appear. It was a manner of treating the phantom either by making it emerge or vanish. Regardless, it's the work of dope. Another way I could say it is it's the anti everything that you believe you stand for. Cancer that a man stores in his hands for laying them on parishioners wishing for some malignance. I'm really just saying what I'm writing is sickening. What I'm writing is vision. What I'm writing is healing. What I'm writing is flashes of lightning across the ceiling, flames from the floor flickering, licking your feet to move you, fool you into believing that when you move, it's the true you. Voodoo dance from dude whose hands expand reality, puppeteering, but from what you're hearing, you do it naturally. And actually, I'm the blame for it all. I'm the reason, even your breathing, if you rise or you fall. They said hip hop's dead. I said it must be a joke, because if that's really the truth, that means I fuck with the ghosts, and I ain't above believing in what people don't see, but I can't believe in it if it don't believe in me. So where are you? An MC steps into a cipher with stories to tell, and for his work to work, it must be dope. He must be dope. Here, dopeness could be a response to the question Avital Ronell asks in Crack Wars. What if drugs named a special mode of addiction, however, or the structure that is philosophically and metaphysically at the basis of our culture? It is a special mode of addiction, the structure that is philosophically and metaphysically at the basis of our culture. Ronell prefaces her question by stating, quote, our drugs uncover an implicit structure that was thought to be one technological extension among others, one legal struggle, or one form of cultural aberration classifiable in the plural, drugs, a singular plural. They were nonetheless expected to take place within a restricted economy. So Owning My Masters, The Rhetorics of Rhymes and Revolutions responds to Ronell's text, which describes the ways in which cultures need drugs. En route to describing the implications of this assertion, Ronell illustrates how drugs are not, as we love to imagine, part of some subculture, but necessary components of culture itself. Ronell uses the literary lives of Baudelaire, Freud, and Flaubert to support her claim. I add Ralph Ellison's narrator and Invisible Man to this list, as he's under the influence of reefer that, quote, some jokers gave him when he discovered this new analytical way of listening to music described in the novel's prologue, which is remixed into the introduction of Owning My Masters, The Rhetorics of Rhymes and Revolutions. I make the same assertion, take it a step further, utilizing hip hop, where Ronell describes beings on drugs, hip hop matches, and then one ups her. Hip hop's aspirants aim to be the drugs. More specifically, an artist like me would desire to be dope. So owning my master's attempts to answer the question that Alexander Wehelier asks in Phonography's Grooves in Sonic Afro-Modernity. He asks, what happens once the Black voice becomes disembodied, severed from its source, recontextualized and re-embodied and appropriated, or even before this point? It attempts to perform what Trisha Rose calls techno-Black cultural syncretism in Black noise, rap music, and Black culture in contemporary America by combining Black oral traditions with the sampling of Black voices, by utilizing recording technologies to enter into conversations with those voices. Additionally, the project and the projects that come after it engage African-American rhetorical traditions in contemporary practice and Black study as outlined by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten in The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning, and Black Study. I call the digital liner notes for the projects bad documents, referencing Harney and Moten's perspectives on how one might engage the university in fugitivity. The idea of fugitivity relates to my desire to complicate the simple town and academy binary that I was thinking in my previous work. Specifically, Obi mentioned the book Cold, which is set in Decatur, Illinois, as well as the town, in the town and at the university. And so I think that I was thinking that the narrative would be effective if I were to say town equals prose, or I'm sorry, town equals rap, university equals prose, and then like something in between equals poetry. It was an artificial binary that fails to hold up to close scrutiny as it changes it changes as the context for the work change. So when the work is music, where it is being created and how it is being disseminated matters to me, perhaps more than it does to many listeners. For audiences outside of the academy, the setting, the stories, the characters, the symbols seemingly matter less than it being engaging or appealing intellectually, aesthetically, or otherwise enough on its face. If it's dope, it's dope. Academic audiences seem to want to know how it fits in the larger conversations in the field, whatever the field. And so I don't know that I really want to go through the hip hop historiography, but like while engaging with a whole lot of those texts, I was also listening to a lot of music, living in South Carolina on this former plantation, and I felt compelled to introduce some additional figures into the historiography of hip hop that I was given, to create my own cipher that would ground my project and then help me get at the questions that I'd raised. So one of the productive questions that helped guide my thinking is borrowed from Christopher Small's book called Musicking, The Meanings of Performing and Listening. And he asked, what does it mean, quote, what does it mean when this performance of this work takes place at this time, in this place, with these participants? Or to put it more simply, we can ask of the performance, anywhere at any time, what's really going on here? And so I've modified his question to ask instead, what does it mean when this performance of my Black voice takes place at this time, in this place, with these participants? Or to put it more simply, we can ask of the performance, to return to Rennell, what's really dope here? I am persistent in my commitment to hip hop as transdisciplinary practice that emphasizes the process of making more than the product that gets made. But a way to situate owning my masters in the other albums is to bring into the historiographies of hip hop and these particular conversations, three academic fields, and with them three interesting dichotomies that might be explored. And so the first is what I see as critical Black studies, from which I contend with Alexander Wehelier's distinction between the embodied and disembodied Black voice. And he argues that sound technologies like the phonograph remove from view the body that might be presented in a live performance. And he writes, quote, its materiality was displaced onto the recording apparatus itself and the practices surrounding it, and as a result, rematerialized the sonic force, end quote. He builds much of his work in both phonographies and habeas viscus on the work of Hortense Spillers and Sylvia Winter, whose works also inform my project. And Wehelier arrives at his critical Black studies distinction between the embodied and disembodied voice by crossfading Fred Moten with Jacques Derrida, who poses a philosophical distinction between phonocentrism and logocentrism, which Wehelier describes in simpler terms as speech versus writing, and in other places as singing versus signing. The third distinction comes from musicology. And so Carolyn Abate wrestles with Vladimir Yankeliewicz's distinction between the drastic and the Gnostic in her important 2004 essay called Music, Drastic or Gnostic. And she notes the difference between the experience of a performance of music and the composition of music to be performed. And she makes these differences clearer by questioning what is gained or lost in the experience of the former, as opposed to the latter, stating that she wants, quote, to test the conviction that what counts is not a work in the abstract, but a material present event, end quote. And Abate clarifies that the distinction, quote, involves more than a conventional opposition between music in practice and music in theory, because drastic connotes physicality, but also desperation and peril, involving a category of knowledge that flows from drastic actions or experiences and not from verbally mediated reasoning. Gnostic, as its antithesis implies, not just knowledge per se, but making the opaque transparent, knowledge based on semiosis and disclosed secrets reserved for the elite and hidden from others, end quote. So it's helpful to know that these fields are also in conversation with my interest in what might be called rhetorics of rap and African-American literary traditions to inform what could be called critical hip hop study in the form of the archive that comprises Owning My Masters and the work that comes after it. It's also important to note that the distinctions highlighted here are not the only ways that my projects can or should be engaged. Describing it in a format like this necessitates the limiting of the project by putting them into academic conversations to make them legible and visible to academic audiences. These are included in the reasons I consider the essay a bad document. Still, this talk here attempts to demonstrate these dichotomies in the service of highlighting what might be lost in privileging the disembodied over the embodied voice, the logocentric over the phonocentric, the Gnostic over the drastic. So Owning My Masters, the Rhetorics of Rhymes and Revolutions, opens up theoretical and aesthetic critical space to move away from the either or implied in these rigid dichotomies. And so I hope that you will remember that at the beginning, I played the piece called Ampersand. And I think that that's a more generative way to think about this rather than the either or. It's the ampersand. And the ampersand is what I guess is called a mondegreen. And so at some point, whenever people were learning the alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I'm sure that y'all know the alphabet. But at the end, like rather than whatever it is that people say now, I don't know what people say now because I don't know any children that I have to teach it. But I remember learning, like now I know my ABCs and whatever. But at some point, people used to say, like X, Y, Z, and per se, and. And the reason that they would say and per se and is because they would say on its own that little symbol. So Z and the ampersand. But the way that children, and it's beautiful how children just change language and make it into whatever it is. They would just say ampersand. And so ampersand stuck. And so rather than being called on its own and, it's called ampersand. And I think that that's just a beautiful way to think of how language works in practice, that it becomes the thing that people hear it as rather than the thing that somebody is like even literally trying to say it literally is, and by itself and. There's a whole lot more, I guess, that I could say. I said that I was going to talk for 10 to 15 minutes. I don't know how long I've been talking, but I can shut up now and then, get into the conversation. Like I said, there's so much more. I should say that after owning my master's, I defended. I think by the end of that weekend, I was in Charlottesville starting this job as professor of hip hop. It's now associate professor of hip hop. That's just a thing, So, so I released an album like immediately as the beginning of the school year was starting, called, because I had written so much between writing the dissertation and getting to UVA, I released a project called Sleepwalking Volume 1. And then the next year I released Sleepwalking Volume 2. And then, but also understand that in 2017, that was when the Unite the Right rally happened here in Charlottesville. So if you can imagine getting to a place like Clemson, South Carolina, and all of the stuff that happened there, like including, like a Trump rally on campus, and just like racial terror every 3 months, it seemed. And then getting to a place like Charlottesville and arriving right when the Unite the Right rally is planned, and then having to teach 10 days after that happens. So I released the project called Sleepwalking, and then I released Sleepwalking 2 the next year. I did sound design for a project called, for a play called The Royale, which is an adaptation of the first chapter of Ellison's book, Invisible Man. And then I did I Used to Love to Dream with Michigan, and then we get to Talking to Ghosts in the most recent project. And so I apologize for the very abbreviated timeline, but yeah. So that's where we are now.
Wow. That's dope.
I appreciate that.
That's dope. Oh, well done. Excellent stuff. Ben, you are the curator of this, and you have done so much research on AD. I think you should flag this off. Let's hear what you have to say.
Oh, thank you. Sure. Yeah, I was going to hold back on there's lots of questions that I want to ask, things I want to talk about. I was going to hold back, but no, okay, I'll dive in. You say so. I mean, there's a few different things that I want to ask about, because part of it, I just want to say is I really want to talk shop on a certain level, because I'm someone who, like, I founded a videographic journal. And so it's like we publish video articles. And so I'm really interested in, like, because these are the questions I get, like peer review, who are the readers, how does it work, and working with an academic press, like, and then this question of, like, are the tracks separated? And because then there's, like, the DOIs and everything. I'm interested in that, but that's actually not, I don't want to start with that talking shop, although I would like to hear about those details. I mean, or maybe I should start with that, and then I'll ask you, because I have another sort of more speculative question. All right, let me start with that, since I already said it. I have another more speculative question, but can you tell us, like, what has it been like to work with an academic press in this context, in terms of, like, I mean, I am really interested in that question of, like, peer review, and how is that distinguished from processes of peer review that might go along with a commercial album publication, just in terms of, like, because now we're also at a time where academic peer review is starting to also include, like, oh, well, maybe we should publish the thing first and then do a kind of public peer review. And it's like, okay, well, that starts to look like a lot of other kinds of peer review, but also this question of, like, who is a peer? And then also what you said, I mean, you mentioned this, but I'd love to hear more, like, about the digital object, the way that it's held, and how it's held differently than it would be on a music platform. Yeah, I'd love to hear more about kind of and that doesn't have to be just that album, it can be all the way through to the current ones, but, like, how are you thinking about navigating those technologies as the technologies also change, the platforms change? I mean, it wouldn't be surprising in some way for a university press to have a Spotify platform if it's going to go in that direction. But I know that, at this moment, probably they're not, they're using this Fulcrum, which is a totally different kind of a platform. So what's your thinking about these technologies and the way that the objects are held and the processes of peer review, that kind of logistics, like logistics, but it's also epistemological, of course.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so I don't, and I'm saying this, I should say that, like, I love working with the folks that I work with at University of Michigan Press, and they are not the first folks that I talked to about this. And there were lots of, I think, like, sort of fits and starts, failed attempts, folks who were really interested in things, and then found out they weren't interested once they realized that it was going to require some work and some thinking on their part. And so I say this with the utmost respect to the people, particularly Sarah and Lauren, involved in that process, that, like, we've learned a lot through going through the process. And so in that way, it's worth it. But in the way that, like, that academia can be trash, it's also that. And again, I mean that as, like, not disrespect. I mean that as the way that things are. So sometimes you're reading something that's supposed to be a response to the work, and it's like somebody just, like, hates the fact that you're doing it. And so it seems as if somebody is, like, sort of on the inside, and they have the opportunity to say, absolutely nobody should be doing this kind of thing. And what will it mean to my job and the jobs of others if this kind of thing happens? And that's a weird thing to have to deal with when you've spent a whole lot of time and energy on a project, and situating that project in the conversation that this, whoever these people are, believe that it shouldn't be in because they, like aren't, I don't know, hip to it, or they're just afraid of it because nobody asked you that question. That's not the question that you're being asked as one of the people. And so, well, then the question for the presses have to be like the stakes of the peer review process have a whole lot to do with the relevance of the platforms. And I'm not saying that it's any easier or better if we're going through. I'm not saying that it's better if we're going to SoundCloud or Bandcamp. And actually, I've got stories about either of them. With, on the one hand, with SoundCloud, my class that's called the class is called Composing Mixtapes, and the students write an album together, and they've got to produce it, they've got to write it, they've got to record it, they've got to mix it, and then they put the album out. And we're looking, well, where are we going to put the album? And it seemed that weekend that SoundCloud was about to go bankrupt, and we had no clue. We had no clue whether SoundCloud would be around the next week. And so one of those albums is on Bandcamp because SoundCloud was almost gone. It's still there now. But then I know that with owning my master's with Bandcamp was like, well, I want it to be free. I want it to be accessible. If anybody goes anywhere to get my music, if you get it on Bandcamp, then just put 0 in. It'll ask you for an amount. But that was a silly thing that I had to do because the people at Bandcamp Daily said that they wouldn't write about the album unless I turned on the potential for monetization. And so, it's like you can't give the music away, or you can give it away. But if you give it away, then we're not going to write about it. We're not going to promote it in any way. So, we have to be able to make something off of it because they get a percentage of whatever anybody might donate. And so for those reasons, it's like none of them are perfect, but I think that they also bring up questions about what even are the streaming platforms doing and how they might serve all of us better for all of the music that we get. And it is because, I'm in this position sort of free from whatever the market might say about whether it's a good album or not, or whether it's an album that sells or not. And I have some desires, some goals that are outside of whether Rolling Stone gives the album a thumbs up or not. And so I don't, I'm not beholden to that. And it frees me up in certain ways. And I believe that there are a lot of artists who would be freed up in those same ways if there were ways that they might be able to release their music, and then the logics of promoting academic material or promoting open access music, if those were the kinds of things that might catch on in some way, then instead of having someone like Mickey Fax featured on a song, or someone like Lupe Fiasco, those folks who are sort of moving into spaces where they are they're invited to speak at academic conferences or for fellowships or visiting appointments, maybe they would consider doing projects that lean in that way, and then won't have to worry about selling the album at all because there, might be an audience that could do this other thing with it. And the way that we make that easiest, I don't want anybody from my hometown who wants to teach my music to say, well, we wanted to teach it, but we didn't have enough copies, or it was it cost too much. The district couldn't pay for a license for it. That's the last thing that I want, because one of the things that I know about a place like my hometown that, which I'm going back to this weekend, is that, the histories that are written about the place are really awful histories. And that's not just my hometown, but, who then, who makes sure that, that my parents, my grandparents, my aunties, my uncles, my folks' voices get recorded and that they get added to the things that are called, histories about this place. And so one of the things that I'm able to do through this process of releasing this music through the academic press is to also commit those folks' names and these sonic engagements to the historical record through this academic publication that this press is calling historic. And so one of the things that I really wanted to focus on with doing I Used to Love to Dream is to take a documentary film that's about Decatur, Illinois. It's filmed about a block from where my dad grew up, from where my grandparents lived. And in that documentary, even though it's a block from where my grandparents lived, ain't no Black people in the documentary. It doesn't even make sense that, you know, this town that we know demographically to be as interesting as it has been for, you know, as long as it's been around, sonically and visually is presented as, you know, like what they call Playtown, USA, like Everywhere USA or Pleasantville. And that's absolutely not the same town that was ravaged by, you know, drugs and violence that, you know, me and my siblings and my cousins grew up in. So what is it like? What does it even mean to have a history of that sound that doesn't reflect our experiences or the things that paved the way for our experiences? And so there's a kind of ideological work being done by making it into a rap album. So when someone says that the histories of Decatur are written or are recorded by this documentary about Playtown, USA, and maybe the introduction to James Lowen's, you know, Sundown Towns and Lies My Teacher Told Me, and this rap album that University of Michigan released. And so one of the interesting things that happened before James Lowen passed away is that he and I even had a conversation about this, because Lowen, who wrote Sundown Towns and Lies My Teacher Told Me, is from Decatur, Illinois. And so it was a kind of cool thing that happened when I was down there in South Carolina writing about Clemson, that Lowen kind of pops up in the comments of an article where someone's saying is like, you know, accusing me of revisionist history. And it's like, no, rap has been doing this thing for a long time, and you just probably, you know, like should listen a little more intently. And so we started up an email correspondence. But of course, I'd read his work and was just really interested in the fact that, you know, this famous historian that did this work that I really looked up to, you know, when he's talking about Woodrow Wilson or the Woodrow Wilson School that he went to as a kid, that's just 2 blocks from my pop's house. So that's a really long answer to the question, but hopefully it's helpful.
Okay. No, it is. Can I ask part 2 of my question, or should I can wait?
No, you wait, Ben. Time is not our friend. When you're listening to such insights, you know, you don't know time is flying. We are an hour into the talk, and let's manage the time a little bit. Let me bring it home to my own personal experience. Everything you spoke about voices and about gatekeepers and stuff like that with the university, I have a first-hand experience. But I would like to tap into your thinking here. I'm also doing a Ph.D., like I said earlier on. I have done, you know, a body of work that is, I was told, is deserving of a practice-based research. And I considered that for a little while. But, you know, I think with the PhD, you have this imposter syndrome where you're saying, am I accepted? Am I going to be accepted as one of the into the academia? And I had that. So in a conversation with my missus, I said, you know what, let me not show any signs of arrogance, and that's what I called it, arrogance. Kind of artistic arrogance that says I've done enough to reflectively write about my work. Let me shove that to the side. Let that be part of my arsenal for coming to this game, for analyzing other people's work, for analyzing the theory. Let me not bring it up front and forward. So I decided to do a more critical, general-based research, which I'm at the tail end of right now. How did you get yourself to that position where you said, and at what point did you decide that I was going to do? Did you go into the graduate school thinking that you were going to do a reflective performance-based research, or at what point did the coin drop about you doing this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's a great question, and I think that like also related to it is, like sort of responses, like especially academic responses, because like there's that too. And what I'll say is that when I got there, when I applied, I thought that I would be doing something that is maybe like the exact opposite of what I do. And I should say that I was misguided. I thought, well, maybe what I want to do, maybe what needs to be done is like a dictionary of terms, like so I can like something like that, which is kind of silly now that I think about it. And there are things that are out there, and like I wish that it wasn't true that folks continue to ask me, if I'm interested in doing a project like that, because I'm not. But in the, I want to say in the in the third semester that I was there on campus, there was, I heard a talk that was given by one of the professors in the English department, and it was about the sort of the land and the legacy at Clemson, and it was about convict laborers, but slavery, sharecropping, and convict labor, I think is what it was about. And so one of the things that those things had in common for me as I was thinking about the campus was the fact that the mascot is a tiger. And when I went to visit that plantation house the first day, I guess black is my favorite color. And so I was wearing black, and I went out, and someone at that plantation house said, well, you must not be from here, or you must be new on campus. They were older women. They said that they thought that I might be a first-year student. And I asked why, and they said, well, because on Fridays, like, we wear orange here. And so they would have this thing called Solid Orange Fridays, where if you're a person, I don't know, aesthetically, it's ugly as hell, but like, it's just like weird to be on a campus where everybody decided they're going to dress alike on one day of the week, every weekend. But that was like sort of the thing that rallied them around football. And I'm like, well, kind of flippantly to these older women, I represent the stripes then, like tigers like have stripes. I think I posted that on social media later. Then I saw this talk, and it was about, like I said, convict labor, the convict leasing system, the sharecroppers, and enslaved people. And I thought, like, well, what would be really interesting is if we could take this thing that they're doing every Friday, because I'd heard nothing about this up until I heard this colloquium talk. And it was going to be published in the South Carolina Review that was coming out later that semester. What if people knew that story, and how could we make the story about those three things like easy to disseminate to the people in the community? And so when I was in Illinois, I'd done some kind of similar work working with the park police. Like they would have these the National Park Service had a space in Springfield, Illinois, where they wanted to try to make sure that the people in central Illinois knew about the history of racial terror and violence that went on there. And these historic homes, like the riots in Springfield in 1908 were like at least one of the events that led to the founding of the NAACP. And, it was kind of like whack to go to the 200th meeting, and like so few people are there because maybe so few people know that this is, like a big piece of history. And so the people from the national parks asked if I would be willing to make, like these short musical pieces that would be able to point folks toward this history that they don't have. So how do you make media that is spreadable, whether it's rap music or it's poetry or whatever it is, but it's just something that gives people enough that they'll have the information and they want to seek more. So I took that directly to Clemson and said, well, like enslaved people, convict laborers, and sharecropping all of them have stripes like this, like tiger mascot have stripes. And so like, if we could think about the stripes, you know, like that would be across an enslaved person's back, you know, from being whipped, or the stripes in the land from sharecroppers, and the stripes on the uniforms of the convict laborers, then we could simply ask the people who are already doing, like putting a lot of money into this campaign to get everybody, even elderly women who come to visit campus, to tell people that they should be wearing orange. So what I would ask in return to those people is if they could see the stripes, not just the stripes in the tiger mascot, but the stripes in the history. And that's one of the songs, I think it's track 13 on the dissertation album. And I put that online the first day of that third semester. And the hate mail, the vitriol, I mean, like all of it came immediately. People, like somebody's like, yeah, I'd love to, you know, like tie you to the back of my truck and show you around town, you know, like that kind of stuff. And then the university, you know, someone from athletics called, and then they were like, well, we need you to make a statement. And I'm like, fam, I made a statement. It's a 6-minute video. It's online already, you know, watch it. Also, feel free to quote from it. You know, I mean, whatever. They weren't trying to hear that. So then one of the trustees comes to town. He wants to take me to lunch, and, you know, he wants to talk. They invite me to football games, all these things. And then I realized at that moment that all these people were telling me, you can say whatever you want, you can do whatever you want, but don't do that. Don't say that. And I realized, oh, this is exactly the thing that I need to say and what I need to do. And so that's the moment that I knew, the moment that it was clear to me that folks feared that it might change the way that things were going on, because those folks had no clue that it was a doctoral dissertation project or that it was even a part of the work I was doing. It was working in public with people. And those people were either really concerned or really receptive, but like it also created a way to organize around all of the other things. And so it was literally like saying, like, all of this started with, you know, like with the song, all of it started with the poem, all of it started with some lyrics. And all of that work, like every single action that went on campus, like every protest from that point forward. And they didn't start off as protests. They started off as saying, here's the thing that's happened in the world. If there are people who are feeling hurt or harmed, or, you know, just want to have some folks to like to just be in solidarity with around whatever might be going on in the world, because this place, this plantation that we're on seems hostile to our existence, and the rest of the world like seems to also want us to die, or at least concede that our lives don't matter, or don't matter as much as anybody else's or as everybody else's. They started to be a way to organize. And then I knew that that was the work. There wasn't some other work outside of that. So then to ask, like, you know, like, well, what's the theory? Like, how does it work? How does it work in practice? Look outside. Like, if you go outside on a Friday and you can look from a tall building on campus and it looks like a tiger, and it looks like, you know, stripes, because we've got black t-shirts that we've given away that say "See the Stripes" with the website on it and more information. If we've made the campus look like a tiger, then that's how the work works in practice, you know, and it's connected to all of these other things. And so it seems merely aesthetic, but you're literally making the place, like when I went back to that plantation house, the guide is like, "Hey, I know you." And I'm like, "Impossible, because I don't know you." And they're like, "No, we watch your video in our training." And I'm like, that's interesting, because like I didn't make a training video, but of course they did. And again, I mean yeah. So to me, it just seemed like practically this is a thing that we can do, but also the accountability. It's not for the institution to take what I've done and then say that they've done it. It's for the university to do something different. But, you know, of course, you know, like the thing that you are working against when you're working against the university is that the university is going to say you're working for them. And so that's the caution that, you know, like that Moten and Harney kind of give us. And so then on the note of like people saying on the other side of that, well, you didn't really do a PhD, or you didn't really do a dissertation or whatever. And so like this idea of, I don't know, validation or viability or credibility with my peers, you know, I mean, it's silly, but I think that in my job talk, somebody asked a question that was similar. And I think that I said, you know, there's a lyric on the album that says that it's kind of cribbing the flow of the Jay-Z flow from Renegade. But it says, a motherfucker say that I'm foolish because I'm rapping for school. Do you fools read my reviews, or do you just read? Do you fools read my reviews, or do you just skim through them? I'm influenced by the ghettos I grew in. The same dude who paid dues decided to change rules. Never been stupid and won't assume it of you. But if you can't see my picture, I ain't painting for you. And that's it. You know, like that. The folks who need to get it will get it, and the folks who don't, you know, like they will either get with it or get passed by.
I would say that, you know, the academic rigor in your work, the academic endeavor in your work is outstanding. I think it's, you know, you're doing it a disservice calling it a performance-based research, because you have, you know, based on what you've read to us, you have done an extensive research, you know, with, you know, very extended references and stuff like that. So that is standard conventional research. So I think it's I know, you know, the idea of doing a practice-based research is to stand out, but even if you want to stand in, you can mix right in, because the quality of your academic endeavor is outstanding, I would say.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but I've never called it performance-based anything like that. I think that those are things that other folks kind of project onto it, but I never, you know, like I never saw it that way, and I never called it that. Like, it's just that, you know, the thing that this album is doing, or that these albums do, are the things that I get from other albums. And so I've always felt this way about music, and just like the bibliographies that are given to me by, you know, by folks like Tierra Whack or Fonte, Little Brother, and, you know, Mos Def, or whoever else that, you know, that I'm, Missy Elliott, that I'm listening to, like they lead me to hear and see all of, I mean, again, like, as I'm saying, as the Invisible Man narrator says, that, you know, like you're able to like sort of see and hear around corners. It's like this new critical analytical way of listening. Like, that's literally the way that dope music makes me think of the stuff that I'm reading in other places. And so I'm always like, when I'm listening to these artists, and then I open up, you know, whatever novel that I'm reading or whatever scholarship that I'm reading, I'm like, oh, this is like this thing. And so it's just like, it's a frame. It's like watching the Carpenter They Live film. Like, you put the glasses on and like you're now able to read all of these signs that are around. It's just that the glasses are, you know, rap music and hip hop production. And even, you know, like thinking about a bass line that's just like a little offbeat, you know, like when you're hearing about that, and like sort of the discomforting that you have when it's like, yo, like, why is that not like sort of, why is it not syncing to the grid? That's academic as fuck to me. You know, like that's a real thing, that like when you hear Dilla do that, and when you hear those vocals and the way that they kind of like they sink into that pocket, even though the pocket is like not even really there the way that it has previously existed in all of the time that people have been producing on drum machines. Like, somebody needs to, it's not just that like it sounds groovy like that. I mean, that seems to be a disservice to like what the music is doing. And I think that, you know, like that's what's been happening with rap for a really long time, is people are like, oh, I love the fact that your album, or I love the fact that your research is an album. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I love the fact that your research is sentences. Like, I haven't really said anything by saying that, you know, like I'm just noting that the form is the form. But like, what else? Like, what does that tell you? That it is sentences should tell you something. That it is rap should tell you something. And there's hella information in the fact that it is rap. And even as we think about how rap is specific to particular locations, rap from Charlottesville, or rap from Decatur, or rap in London, or rap in South Africa, all of those are communicating different pieces of information that people will be able to pick up on. And if you aren't able from the front of the class to pick up on that, then you need to start listening to the people who can tell you what that information might be. Because rather than saying that New York drill should be banned because people are dying, maybe we should be listening to New York drill and what the rappers are communicating, the information that's communicated by that form, so that it can inform us to be better about the kinds of policies that need to be enacted in places like New York or Chicago or wherever else that, you know, like folks are making drill music, because drill music is a reflection of where it's made. It's not creating where it's made.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, I think we'll take a musical interlude.
Word.
But before we do, I'll read out. So I'm inviting all participants, all guests. If you have any questions, please just raise your hand. I haven't seen any hands raised yet. Or you can type comments in the chat or question in the chat, and I'll be able to read it out. Just before we go on the musical interlude, I'll read out a comment by LXO, which says, some of the themes in your talk reminded me of a piece I read by Morton and Harney called Mikey, the Rebelator, which I don't know if you've read, but the so-called jaywalking and disapproving the line and the English language, and how even with a piece of Morton and Harvey, with the piece, Morton and Harvey moved through different textual genres, patois, and musicality with their poetic writing that sort of breaks the Queen's English, but sort of jaywalks this either or of academic essays. I think Lexo must have been typing from their phone, so there might be a few things that I've misread there, but you get the general gist of what she's trying to say. So think about the answer to that comment, but let's just take the musical interlude and
okay, cool. I'm going to play a piece from I Used to Love to Dream that is called Just in Case. This is a piece that I think that was written while I was in South Carolina, but then I recorded it here in Virginia after the first time I was pulled over by police here in the Commonwealth. Let me see.
The last time, for the first part of the playback, there were no videos. You could ensure so that we can engage with it more.
Yes, I can do that. I have to. For some reason, it is. Whoops. Sorry about that. I am somehow missing the. Okay, it's the video is there, but it's for some reason it's not showing up. Give me 1 second. Sorry.
So while you're fiddling around with the technical stuff, are you ready? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It goes. If I die in police custody, please ask questions, because though I sometimes speak out of turn and ask why more often than some folks care to entertain, I don't see me leaving in exchange with an officer so depressed and disconcerted that it would make me take me away from you. If you're told I resisted, please ask for evidence, because you and I know they're armed with everything from pepper spray to tasers, and taking that into consideration, anything that would make me move suddenly or do anything to escalate their use of force to my own final destination in that moment is less likely than what you'll find to be true. If they tell you how bad I was before then, please remain vigilant, because none of my past behavior should justify me leaving an interaction with law enforcement with the ultimate penalty enacted without the due process afforded others in courts of law. In fact, if law enforcement forces those who laws enforced impact, whose backs and torsos act as source code, hacked, and more so lack the morals tacked to moral acts, then go and ask if my blasting or maiming was more a result of semi-factual blaming than poor tactical training. And whoever's tasked with staffing and claiming credit for a job well done should be person number one to whom this query is posed. What I'm asking is for you to ask and keep asking if those sworn to protect and serve say to you that in order to properly execute their duties, it was necessary to execute me, And the truth is, you know it doesn't match up with the truth you know to be. It's likely because the truth that's in between the two is too inconvenient for those who have the power to speak it. And the way to honor me isn't to turn the other cheek. It's to ask again and again, again and again, why? And I'm telling you now to ask these questions then, because it seems to be happening far too frequently, and the trend is forcing me to err on the side of suspicion. And my only true defense against what may be inevitable, unconscionable as it should be to us all, is to hold whoever's at fault responsible, even if who's responsible is considered the law.
A.D. the Great.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So
Right.
yeah, and that's from I Used to Love to Dream. So with the I'm sorry, the comment about the Moten piece and sort of performativity in writing, I think that that's one of the things that I found very very appealing, and maybe just like, I mean, I claim, I mean, because of that, because of the piece that I just played for you, and I wrote an essay with NPR called "To My Mother," just in case, even though on the album it hopefully like it implies that, but it doesn't say that explicitly. But when I did write the piece, it was for my mother, and I mean, even like the cat, like rapper as a category, is kind of limiting, but I understand what it means to be called a rapper right now, you know, like doing the job that I do. And so there's a kind of work that's being done by that, but I feel like I want to do the thing that's the most effective in the moment to communicate the thing that needs to be communicated most urgently, you know, like sort of like for whatever the impact. And that is and so this means that like whatever the thing might be. And so what I get out of the Moten out of Moten's writing, a lot of it is it's performative in these ways, and it's not just Moten. I'm looking like Minor Feelings. If you get a chance to read that, the book of essays by by Kathy Park Hung's essays on like called Minor Feelings. The way that she sort of like inhabits the form of the essay. Like, I mean, if a person has ever written an essay that made you think, damn, I thought I could write essays, and now I'm not so sure if I can. Like that's the kind of shit that I want to make. I think Kiese Layman's How to Slowly Kill Yourself and Others in America. It's another book of essays that just kind of make you think like an essay don't have to be one thing. A rap song don't have to be one thing, or an instrumental or a poem or whatever it might be. It don't have to only be the thing that we know it to be. And like I want our work to be like one of the things that we do in my rap lab with the students is like, what do you want it to be and how do we get it to that, rather than here's like a factory where you all make the thing that I'm telling you to make. And so to see that writing, that like sort of like the writing itself is kind of arguing what the argument is, as well as like it's saying the thing, but it's also doing the thing. I think that, you know, we need a lot of work like that. I think that that's something that folks have been asking for, you know, like as the Crisis of the Negro Intellectual by the Hortense Spillers, you know, like would indicate, like in '94, you know, if she's asking this question, you know, like that was, or this question, like what do we know, or what's the work for all we know now, you know, like since the end of the 60s. And I think that we can ask that same question, now. But I believe that work, like it's not for me to just like sort of be or for me, it's not just to be provocative to academic audiences. It really is to like sit those questions in spaces where, like when I go back home this week and I'm talking about this new project with my family, we're not having what folks would consider an academic conversation, but to me, that's the conversation that's most important. Or, you know, the question, as I saw in the chat, like about abolition, you know, and defunding. That's a hard ass conversation to have with families sometimes when, you know, like folks are shooting up the block and they're like, well, you know, like if you believe that the police should be defunded or they shouldn't be here, then what do we do with what's going on the block right now? And I have to be able to enter into that conversation in some way that it's going to be respectful of the perspectives that are there, but also like engaging with the reality of the block that my mom lives on. You know, so that's where I think that the work is most, for me, it's like the reason that I wrote I Used to Love to Dream was because I realized that ampersand, like that like being from Decatur and living in Charlottesville, being from, you know, like sort of outside of the university and then being situated as at a university, being someone called a professor, but like being like having a professorship of hip hop, like all of these things weren't like there wasn't this like easy switch one way or the other. And I can't speak to Charlottesville in the way that I can speak to Decatur, but I also can't speak to Decatur in the ways that I could whenever I lived there. Like I am not living where I'm from, and I'm not from where I'm at. And, you know, like I also don't know where I'm going, you know, and all of these things are things that we have to be aware of. And like folks somehow like try to pretend like they got it figured out. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to find the questions, you know, like I'm trying to learn from the work that I make so that I know where, you know, like I know where I stand, not just know where I stand, but know where I can stand, you know, like know where, you know, like there's like ground that is, you know, like suitable or capable of holding, you know, like me and whoever else might be standing there with me. And I think that that's the more, you know, like the more interesting work. And I think that the interesting work then it lies in these forms that are not yet discovered or that like we are discovering and they seem, I don't know, like confounding whenever we read them. But then like when it reveals itself to us that, you know, like the piece on jaywalking is also doing a kind of, you know, like jaywalking with language, then it's like, oh, fuck, wow. Yeah. Yes. Like that's the kind of thing that we need.
Wow. Wow. Oh, well done. Just to mention Kate Maxwell has said about another relevant article, Wanda Canton, 2022, I spit, therefore I am, rap and knowledge. I think it's another relevant document that I'll probably reference at the end of this. You've already answered Lisa's question, where you stand with defunding the police and the difficulty in having that conversation with folks. Ben, you had a second question. Maybe this is the time. I think we are, you know, winding down the time to closing time. It's been very, you know, informing and very, you know, what's the word? Edifying conversation with AD today. So, you know,
I do have another question, but well, Colin has a hand up. Colin, do you want to go first? I do have a bigger, but it's a little bit open-ended. And anyone else who wants to ask a question, pop it in the chat.
Hi, thanks, AD. That was great. A lot of insight so far. So I'm going to try and maybe focus on just a bit. So I think this bit about the textual element versus the spoken element is really interesting in your work. And especially kind of coming from like the musicology background, like where back in the day, you know, the musicologists would just look at the score and analyze the score, and that was the source of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And there's only recently, in like, you know, 30 years ago in the 90s, was there kind of a shift towards actually the sonic, you know, the listening, and I guess more towards the musicking side of things, looking at more of the cultural, the things going on socially. So I'm wondering if you think, like, and in terms of what you've been doing, have you run into a lot of kind of resistance from this old school way of thinking, which, kind of values the written, the pen on the page as the source of legitimacy. And I feel like a lot of academia has almost built itself on the legitimacy of the written text, rather than something that is, more ephemeral, that kind of passes by us as the word can. And I'm wondering, so maybe in that sense, have you experienced resistance? And do you think that also that resistance rooted in an academia which is uncertain on its legitimacy in an age where things like media, where sound, video even carry more leverage in this day and age?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And yeah, indeed, I have felt the resistance, and I mean, yeah, sometimes it's like it's really petty and absurd enough that I can just laugh at it, and then other times it's it's more insidious. But where folks will ask, well, I mean, I've been asked, point blank at conferences, can you write? Which seems like a silly question, but that is a question. Or yeah, but yes, I think that those questions are like sort of rooted in a sort of an investment in form that brings, I mean, that really, like, it's like the form is so important because it literally corresponds to like idealized bodies. And because it corresponds to these idealized bodies, the idea, like when a person says, like I read a Twitter comment and a person is like, well, like I sure hate to be rap battled out of, like a tenured position. And I'm like, well, why would you be any more worried about that than you would be worried about like any other position? Like if you're in a position where rap battling is are the stakes and you can't rap battle, then you don't deserve that fucking position. So move on. But the fact that a person is saying that, it's really saying like, well, look out, like the rappers are going to come. And I think that that's the fear, is that, like, I mean, it's cool for us to say that, like that Nas 30 years after Live at the Barbecue, can have his name on this thing at Harvard, because you don't have to worry about 17-year-old Nas coming to your campus from Queensbridge. Like, because, and that's like, that's a way different thing, having that 17-year-old be on your campus and having that, that sort of that elder who has this, older person who has a whole music career and is a business person and is kind of bought into your order of the world. But I want 17-year-old Nas or 17-year-old, Love the Genius. Like, I want those people as my students, because those folks are bringing ways of thinking about the forms that we are dealing with and the problems in the world, the issues that are going on, in the ways that rappers tackle these things specifically. And I think that the worry about that is really like the same worry about like the demographics changing more generally. It's that, like, if those seats are open to those people, then that's fewer seats for us. One of the biggest issues at Clemson that I saw when we were talking about the demographics in Clemson during the time that I was there was somewhere between 84% and 88% white. And folks kept saying that, that the diversity issue is that, we can't really get past 6% Black students. And I'm like, the diversity issue is that the place is 88 or 84% white. That's the issue. And like, when we start talking about the issue being whiteness rather than like the little slice of like whatever else, then folks start feeling really threatened, because if we say that, well, there's no way we can get that 6% up anymore, or like anything that's supposed to be in that like sort of that 12 to 16, the only way that we're going to get that up is if that number of, like orange students decreases. That number is going to have to go down. And that's the only way that we're going to get it. And if we're in a state that is, 30 something percent people of color, then like that 80 something number is like absolutely appalling. And it feels like it shouldn't be the thing that's happening at a state university. And so how is it that the diversity conversation isn't about how ubiquitous like whiteness is here? And so that's the same kind of thing with these conversations about, you know, like sort of the printed word. It's like, it's really just a whole bunch of, you know, hand wringing over who's going to have access to the spaces. And so I know that when Owning My Masters came out, people seem to be really pissed. Some guy told me on the internet, because I don't know how that would go face to face, like, well, you're ruining academia and hip hop. And I'm like, yo, like, I would love for you to print that on a t-shirt and I would wear it everywhere that I go proudly, because like, I would love to ruin academia and hip hop. Like, to be the guy who did that, that would be dope. However, you know, like, you're worried for no reason. Like, you know, like, Kendrick Lamar is still going to be able to do songs with Taylor Swift. Please don't worry. Like, you know, they still going to get their money and they going to still be doing whatever they're doing. And like, this little thing that we're doing over here ain't going to bother nobody, for real.
Your speech is music. I love it. Can I ask my second question? This is so there's a small, the part of this question is just that I would really love for you to talk more about the Rap Lab. But let me ask a bigger question, and maybe the Rap Lab sits within that. I really am interested in I'm really interested in the form of the university. I'm interested in the pressure points of the form of the university, which I think, like, the form of the PhD is it's a leverage point where, like, because it's a gatekeeping point of like, this is what a PhD must look like. Soon as you say this PhD is a hip hop album, you know, you've shifted something. And then there's all sorts of other ones, like, what is a journal article? What is a book? What is a classroom? That kind of stuff. What is a laboratory? So I would love to hear you speak kind of speculatively about ripples outward from your work, because clearly the albums themselves are kind of like the leverage point. It's like, here is it, but it's a PhD, it's a peer-reviewed thing published by University Press. And it's like, from that point, like, once you say that, then, I mean, to me, it's like there's ripples from that. There's explosive ripples that go out from that. That is not, you know, it's not that you have to do all of that work, but like, other people will pick that up and be like, oh, you know, like, what, that was a PhD. So then what is my PhD going to look like? Or these kinds of things. So I'd love to hear more about the Rap Lab, which I guess is a sort of a pedagogical context, but also anything kind of about, like, what struck me was to say, like, if you could compose the university the way you compose a mixtape, what would it look like? Because as you're talking about the ampersand, I'm like, so what does the classroom become? What is the, you know, can we have concerts that are not just kind of like, oh, we have a concert in the university for a moment and then back to everything as usual, but like, how do we transform the whole space?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I know this is, you know, a lot of times folks ask me to come perform, and it's like, yeah, so we're going to do like a performance and a Q&A. And it's like, well, we don't do Q&As after shows. And I'm like, but why not? It's not that we can't do it. And it's not that an audience wouldn't be interested. Also, I'm probably going to do some weird shit on stage that people want to ask questions about. So like, maybe we do open that space up, or, you know, like, you're going to hear some samples that might be disconcerting, and you want to know like what's going on, or like some of that stuff, you know, even I might not even want to answer the question, but it's good to have the question asked. But I think that your question, so the question kind of goes back to that quote that I read earlier, that, you know, like, sort of our drugs being expected to take place within a restricted economy. And this idea that that universities will take the thing that like we're calling dope right here, and then be like, oh yeah, we're the fucking pharmacy, like we're CVS, like we produce this. Like the same folks at Clemson who had me and 4 undergraduates arrested for occupying a building after the See the Stripes piece and all of these things are going on. That same university, their communications people turned around and then they said, here's Clemson University's rap album dissertation. And of course, so they're like, yeah, like we're like Walgreens. They're gonna put the orange paw on you and be like, you're a product of us. And I'm like, all right, we might be able to do this, but like, if I'm gonna be your blue magic, then some different things gonna happen. And you won't be able to, you won't be able to control for the side effects, because like you literally have no business doing this. However, like their business is to do that with everything. So when they asked me to come to UVA, because I think I was still pissed off about being arrested and the whole thing at Clemson, whenever I was being interviewed, and they're like, well, what do you need to be here? And I'm like, well, shit, like go high or go home. I need a space, because when I was at Clemson, it was like, well, I used to rent the library media lab out every Sunday, because like one of the things that, like that I think is unfortunate about music and like even about literature is that, there are not more spaces where we have unstructured time to just like be together around art or to be together around sound. And so I'm like, I am going to have an hour or 2 hours every week where we just sit in a room and listen to shit and talk about whatever. And there's no agenda. It's just like if a thing comes out or if a thing is interesting, if a video is cool and we've got like mad screens, we can kind of do that thing. And so when they asked at Clemson, or when they asked here at UVA, I was like, well, yeah, we need a rap lab. We need a place where that happens. And I need to add a lab time onto my classes where the students get unstructured time to just be with each other, and I can be there, but also it's open to anybody in the community who wants to come in, because people are curious, like, why are you doing this? What are you doing? But also, if you have a thing like this, what about the communities outside of here that this university has pushed out of the space? Like there are no resources or venues for rap to happen in a place like this. And part of that is because the university is hoarding resources. And I'm like, well, the rap lab can kind of invert that and say any artist, any person who's interested in like sitting in on a class or coming in, like you can definitely come during the open hours, but we can make arrangements for any of the other time. And so like the way that looks is that it feels more like it feels kind of like, so the classroom is open to the students who have access 24 hours. They can get in anytime they want. They can record, they can hang out, they can do homework. They can literally write and record and, like produce an album in the space. And then there are several hours during the week that I'm there for open hours. And then I teach my classes in there. But even while I'm teaching my classes in there, students who have access can still come in and use the recording booth or come in and use one of the, the media stations. And the idea is to make something like that bigger. And if we could have something like that bigger, I think the university, again, like in its sort of everlasting quest to, sort of put the Walgreens scroll across the top and say that we do dope shit here, even though they don't know what that might mean. Then I can leverage that, because as the community sees that and they see the value in being able to do it, even if the value is I can go in there and record an album free and have all of the rights to all of the music that I recorded in that space that I didn't have to pay for, then when you say that you are doing the community engagement, you say that you're doing, you can point to this place and you won't be lying when you're saying it. You're not lying because you don't intend to lie. You're not lying because like the place can't exist without doing that. And so if someone's saying like, well, what does the ideal classroom look like for me for what I'm doing? It's the kind of classroom that can be used in all of these ways. So that when we did a writing workshop with a whole bunch of 6 to 12-year-olds, and it is just as easy for them to work in there as it is for any graduate student to work in there. And what's brilliant about 6 to 12-year-olds is that they can write and record a song in one session, because like they're totally open to the process and they believe that they're professionals without you ever having to say that you are a pro at this. And graduate students are going to deliberate over it for like several months and then ask you for 7 meetings and then be like, I'm still not sure that I'm ready to let it go into the world. And so, the 6-year-olds are dope. Like I would prefer them. Our graduate students should learn from them really. But the only way that they're going to know that they can learn from them is to have that space open, so that whenever we're facilitating the workshop, it's kind of like also, back up a little bit and let the young folks lead, because like they know a whole lot of what they want to do. We're here to help them make the thing that they're trying to do into the best thing that it can be. We are not here to try to dictate what their process is. And so I think that that's something that, like, you know, lots of places, I mean, there are versions of it. I know Virginia Tech has a thing in their libraries with their digging in the crates initiative. But this is just like, for me, it's coming from Illinois, working in high schools and community centers. You know, I worked for the Urban League there. I worked for the school district there. I worked for university there as a writer in residence. And all of those things are things now that are incorporated in what I believe the work is now. So it's not just the product or the process and the products, you know, that are considered academic. It's also what's going on in that room, so that my students, all of the students that I work with, are going through these exact same questions that I'm asking about my work. They're just dealing with it at the stage that their work is in currently. And so it's, I mean, like, it's really dope when you see a community like that sort of functioning in the students. They see it as their place. They take ownership of it. So, like, the work doesn't stop because I walk in the room, or when I walk in the room, you know, they're like, you know, what's good? And then they go back to whatever they're doing. Or if I'm there and then they want to come in, they just do their work. And so, you know, it's like the show doesn't, you know, like, begin or end with me. It's the space, it's the resources, and it's the students, you know, kind of understanding themselves as members of a community that is sort of here at the university, but it is a place away from the university while it is at the university.
All right. Eddie, it's been a wonderful chat, and I know I speak for everybody when I say Lisa has actually made a comment about how appreciative she's been of the insights that you've provided, and how grateful she is to the organizers. I would add my own voice to that and say thank you for illuminating our world today, sonically and intellectually. And I'll stay in touch and see how we can collaborate and see what we can do across the Atlantic. I think we are nearly on the 2-hour mark, and I'll hand back officially to Ben to close. But it's been a pleasure talking to you, brother. It's been an education. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Obi, man. I'm looking forward to, whatever kind of collaborations come from it. I'm definitely looking forward to it. So please be in touch.
And I'll just say thank you so much, Obi, for hosting. Thank you so much, AD, for coming. I've been wanting to meet you and learn more about your work for so long, and I'm really grateful that you came and shared all this with us. Really stimulating. I'm really looking forward to thinking more about it and talking more about it. And thanks to everyone who came and added comments and questions and thoughts. We have 2 more of these coming up on the next 2 Tuesdays, so please join us if you can.
Appreciate
Thanks, everyone.
Peace.
Have a great night.
Peace out.